go, do I want to go with 4? Do I want to go with 2? 902. Yes, split it, exactly. And I'm going to call this meeting to order. It's nice to see all of you. We were in Monterey a couple weeks ago, so it feels like a long time since we've seen you, so it's nice to see you again. I'm going to begin by introducing our board members and our staff. With me today are my fellow colleagues. To my left is Vice Chair Fran Spivey Weber, and to her left, even though you can't see her, is Board Member Dee Dee Adamo, but she'll be here in just a moment. To my right is Board Member Tam Dodak, and to her right is Board Member Steve Moore. Mr. Bishop, you're in charge this week. Will you introduce your staff?
Yes. To my left is Chief Counsel Michael Lawfer. To my right is Chief Deputy Director Karen Turkovich. And assisting the board today is Janine Townsend and Courtney Davis.
Terrific. Most of you are familiar with the emergency evacuation procedure, but for those of you who aren't, if you hear, I don't even know what it sounds like, but if you hear a really loud noise, leave the building, take your stuff, take your friends, go over to Cesar Chavez Park, and obey traffic signals, etc., and generally be courteous to your friends in a time of emergency. The meeting is being webcast and recorded, so please speak into the microphone when you come up. And most importantly, please turn your cell phones to stun or turn them off. Same with pagers. Liz, I understand we have a special presentation this morning.
Thank you, Chair Marcus. My name is Liz Haven. I'm the Deputy Director for the Division of Financial Assistance here at the State Water Board. And this morning, it's my great honor to recognize the members of the Operator Certification Advisory Committee. For those of you not familiar with the State Water Board's Operator Certification Program, this I view as one of our core responsibilities and very important to make sure that the wastewater treatment plants around the state are operated in a manner that protects the environment and that every individual has passed the appropriate exam and is certified at the appropriate level. This is a great responsibility that the State Water Board has. And we could not do it alone because none of us are operators, and we need the expertise of subject matter experts. And the group of advisory committee members have served to advise the State Water Board's Operator Certification Program and lend their invaluable assistance. And today we would like to recognize them. So with that, I'd like to call the members of the advisory committee forward to receive their recognition. Please, don't be shy, gentlemen. Come on up here. We have a little token of our appreciation. I will mention that unfortunately we do not provide these individuals with any financial compensation for the work that they do for us. Even their travel is covered by their employers. Thank you, employers. Thank you, employers. And thank you who all serve in this capacity. We have a number of individuals who are nominated by various entities as proposed, or rather required in our regulations. This group meets about once a year, maybe more often. Most recently, they advised us on the regulations that the board approved and that are now in effect. And we continually look to you all for your input and your expert advice on how to run and improve our operator certification program. So without any further ado, let me recognize you individually. Representing municipal treatment plant operators and supervisors nominated by the California Water Environment Association, we have from the South Bayside System, Mr. Hugh Logan, Operations Supervisor. And representing local sanitation agencies other than municipalities, also, nominated by the California Association of Sanitation Agencies, we have from Fairfield Sassoon Sewer District, Mr. Richard Althouse, the Director of Public Works. Thank you, Richard. And representing municipalities nominated by the California State Association of Counties, we have from Sacramento Regional, so everybody knows this plant because we are serviced by this plant, the operations manager, Mr. Michael Berklick. And also representing municipalities, we have from the city of Livermore, a former member, the operations manager, Mr. David Stoops. And nominated by the State Water Board representing colleges and universities is a name I've heard my whole career since I worked next door to the operator's certification program in my early years and worked closely with Mr. James Giannopoulos, who used to run the program. It's my honor to recognize Mr. Ken Carey.
And Liz, I need to interrupt you and assert that it's great to see Dr. Carey, who was my graduate advisor in my civil engineering program.
Wow. Talk about influence. And representing organized labor unions from the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, we have the chief engineer, Mr. Lawrence DeMock. And last but not least here today, we have from Los Angeles County Sanitation District, the plant manager, Mr. Ken Rademacher. And before we go up and have you all take your picture with the board, I do want to recognize 3 people who are not able to be with us today. Mr. David Heinz and Mr. Chris Burke, and also a former member, Mr. Wyatt Truxell. So again, our deepest appreciation for your work, and these folks we're going to put them to work this morning. They're going to move right along to a meeting, and but before you go, please go up forward and get your picture taken. Thank you again.
Right. As you come up, let me just add my thanks. Someone who's run a public works department and been through the operations challenge and all those things. I really value what you do. So thank you for taking the time to also help out your colleagues across the state and making this a great program.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for your service, gentlemen. It's a very important part of the whole system. And I think people sometimes forget that being a treatment plant operator is what is a true green job. You know, someone who's really holding the line to protect the environment. And we really appreciate your service.
Great. Now we'll move on to considering the minutes from June 4th. Before I entertain a motion, I have one addition already. Janine, we didn't mention that Jason Burnett, the mayor of Carmel, spoke at the beginning of that session. That'd probably be a good thing to put into the minutes. And then there was something about CDs are available for purchase that I don't remember from the conversation at all.
All board meetings, the CDs are available for purchase.
All right, does it always say that in the minutes? I don't know why I just...
No, not that. It normally says that it's being webcast.
Right.
And stuff, but because it was at a Monterey and we put that in there so that they knew.
But did we say it when we were there so they would know? I don't think we did.
I'm not sure, but
These are going to fly off the shelves, though. I know it.
yeah, I've gotten my phone's been ringing off the hook.
I've already downloaded it on my, sorry, no, I can't. Great. Oh, so that being said, any additions or corrections to the minutes? Do I have a motion?
Second.
Okay. Thank you.
Is that right?
Okay.
And as amended.
Okay, great. The minutes are adopted. Any reports to make? Oh, I'll go back to that. Public forum? I always miss one thing. Okay, good. Okay, board member reports? Yes.
Actually, if I might take a minute, actually want to discuss the board member report itself as an item.
Okay.
I had a meeting yesterday afternoon with staff of Senate Rules Committee, and one of the items that we discussed was this board member report on our agenda. And it occurred to me that we may not all have the same expectation and understanding of what this item is. So I guess I will make my request. When this item has not always been on our board meeting agenda. It was added at a time where we were and still are trying to improve communication between the board members and between the state board and the regional water boards. So it's my hope, and I hope you'll all do agree, that in this item gives us the opportunity to share with each other some of the activities we've been engaged in where it might be fruitful for others to know about. And then secondly, and perhaps even more importantly, to report back to the state board events of significance at the regional boards for which we covered. I think we also focus on our own respective boards for which we serve as liaisons, that I rarely get a chance, unless something, blows up, to hear about what's happening at some of the other regional boards, good things, and not just, the problematic areas. So I would like to request that we use this item to report on regional board activities, perhaps even requests and issues that regional board members have, and also use it as an opportunity to share with each other what we're working on, and to give each other a heads up on things that may come across our radar screen.
I think that's an excellent idea and a good reminder.
And with that, I do have an item. Last week, I had an opportunity to meet with representatives from Clean Water Action on a variety of issues. But one of the issues that I needed to have you be aware of, if you remember when we had the informational item on mercury and the statewide mercury efforts, Andrea Ventura from Clean Water Action attended. They've been a group that has always been very engaged in this issue, and she was particularly very interested in the proposal to consider identifying and defining subsistence fishing and cultural use as beneficial uses. And so that was one of the things that she wanted to follow up on, and she wanted to make sure that the staff engaged them in that effort. I was recently notified by Ms. Whitney, who I do not see in the audience, oh, there she is, that the executive sponsors, whoever they are for that effort, has recently recommended that the project dropped that activities from their project list. And that concerns me greatly, especially because I personally disagree, but also because I believe from my conversation with Clean Water Action that they have not been engaged in the effort. So before we do something that is of such significance to our EJ and tribal stakeholders, I would encourage staff to not only have the discussion with board members, but to reach out and have that discussion with members of the stakeholders. Make sure you incorporate their concern and perspectives before we decide to not proceed with something that is so significant and so important to them.
I would agree with that, especially since I keep talking about it in speeches as something that we're going to be looking at doing, because I think it's so important.
Yes, of course we would do that. This was a discussion within the staff on setting out priorities within there and what we were looking at and what the scope of the project was and what areas we wanted to focus on first and last. And so we will be bringing that to discussions with the board members and with our stakeholders as we move forward.
All right. Yeah.
In this, I too, this is always, actually it's very helpful to have a confirmation process going on, because we do get reminded of things that people on the outside might find very confusing. And there was a lot of discussion about how we communicate among ourselves as board members, because we must do it in public, if it's more than one person, and particularly how we communicate about the what's going on at the regional boards and in both directions, from them and to them. So I have two reports. One is I attended a meeting in the Sierra at Lake Tahoe, and it was sponsored by the integrated regional water management planning groups that are up in that mostly northern Sierra area, and the Region 5, the Central Valley, and Region 6, the Lahontan region, were on a panel on agriculture and did, I think, a fabulous job. And the Lahontan region said they have $1 million to spend on projects, and that was really quite. I didn't know about that, and I don't know if any of you know, but it's really quite exciting. Now it is just for the Lahontan region, and it's for agricultural issues. So. And it's on their website, so I pass that along. Secondly, I also represented the water boards, but the water energy team of the climate action team at the first of the AB 32 climate scoping meetings that the Air Board is sponsoring, and there will be 3 additional workshops throughout the state, one in Los Angeles next week, one in Fresno, Modesto, and Bakersfield in July, and then one July 30th, I believe, in San Francisco area. And so if you're interested in climate issues, particularly those that have water is a focus, along with a number of other areas, agriculture, forests, and some other things, you should check the Air Board website for updates.
Frank, can you and Max, or can you have Max do maybe a presentation at one of the board meetings as an information item?
Sure.
Because it sounded pretty exciting, so that would be great. Anything?
Well, I'll go ahead and follow Ms. Dodig's recommendation. Last week, I had an interesting tour that Turlock and Modesto irrigation districts put together with a focus on groundwater, and not just groundwater within the district, but some of the impacts that are occurring outside of the district. And so it was a very informative tour, and I suggested that they put together another tour or tours for the board members, staff, and then also to invite some of the other stakeholders that are interested in the Bay Delta proposal. I think it would be very useful information for the entire stakeholder community. So stay tuned.
That's great. Thank you.
I wouldn't want to be left out. I'll just, there are so many things going on in the regions. But I'll just bring up one issue in the North Coast region, because when I was giving my liaison report, I was asked a question, what is the state board doing, about this issue? And I had to say, honestly, it's something that we're tracking, but we're not doing a whole lot about. And that is the significant impact that marijuana cultivation has on erosion control and sedimentation, but also on diversion of water. And so the North Coast Regional Water Board has, in May, convened a panel, and they have been providing leadership. Stormer, Filer, and staff have been convening multiple multi-agency groups, like a task force approach to dealing with this issue, sort of from the grassroots level at this point, but in dealing with the multiple impacts. And so, this is one of those situations where you've got a population that doesn't necessarily, they're not want to file notices of intent to comply with general permits. And so it's not an easy fix, and we've covered it, and our public information folks have been at these meetings. But I'm comfortable elevating it to an issue of statewide significance, because it's not just North Coast Regional Board. It's Central Valley, it's San Francisco Bay, Central Coast, et cetera, et cetera. And so this will be an item of ongoing interest because in certain areas where, there's timber management and that sort of thing, our regulatory reach hasn't gotten to this point, and yet, the quantitative impacts are significant and can erase the effectiveness of other good stewardship in the same watershed. So, it's an issue of great importance, and so I'm happy to elevate that here at the statewide level, and ask staff to meet with me, and we can brainstorm how we can provide more support for the regional board's efforts.
If I might suggest, since we've been encouraging regional boards to take leadership of issues that then can be developed and addressed statewide, when you have the discussion with Board Member Moore, I suggest exploring asking the North Coast Regional Board staff to take the leadership role on this issue.
We'll certainly do that. We also recently, and if you would like, Jim Castle, who I'm catching by surprise, is sitting in the back of the room. We recently issued, I believe, 27 notices related to diversion associated with marijuana cultivation, and he can provide you with some additional information if you would like.
Great. Well, thank you all, and thank you, Tam, for that reminder. We should all keep it in mind.
Thank you, Senate Rules Committee staffer, if you're watching.
Good. All right. On to item 3, which is uncontested. Mr. Bishop, do we have any cards on this?
I will move for adoption of the item.
A
Second.
second? Any opposed? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Mr. Bishop, item 4.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Item 4 is an amendment to our once-through cooling policy. As some of you are aware, when that policy was adopted, the responsibility for permitting those facilities, those once-through cooled power plants along the coast, was moved from the regions to the State Water Board. This amendment reverts that back to the regional boards as where staff thinks it's appropriate. We have a whole host here. I think Renan is going to lead this. Is that correct? Or is Shuka is going to lead this presentation. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Chair Marcus, board members. My name is Shuka Rastigarpur, Environmental Scientist, Ocean Standards Unit, Division of Water Quality. I'm here to present our proposed amendment for the once-through cooling policy. Oh, sorry. On May 4, 2010, the State Water Board adopted the statewide water quality control policy on the use of coastal and estuarine waters on power plant cooling, also known as the once-through cooling policy. This policy was established to implement Federal Clean Water Act Section 316B requirements, which entail that the location, design, construction, and capacity of cooling water intake structures reflect the best technology available for minimizing adverse environmental impacts. The intent of this policy is to protect the beneficial uses of states' coastal and estuarine waters, while also ensuring that the state's electrical power needs are also provided. This policy applies to 15 existing power plants that withdraw coastal and estuarine waters for cooling purposes using a single pass system called once-through cooling. Originally, the once-through cooling policy applied to 19 power plants, but since its adoption in 2010, 4 have come into compliance. Clean Water Act Section 316B is implemented through the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permits, also called the NPDES permits. They're issued pursuant to Clean Water Act Section 402, which authorizes the point source discharge of pollutants to navigable waters. Regulation of intake and surface water discharges from cooling water intake structures was traditionally implemented through NPDES permits issued by the regional water boards. To ensure a high level of statewide consistency in implementing Section 316B, the current policy requires that the State Water Board to assume responsibility for all NPDES permit actions for existing power plants subject to this policy. This includes, without limitation, actions to issue, modify, reissue, revoke, and terminate NPDES permits. The proposed amendment consists of changes to this policy to reassign NPDES permitting authority to the regional water boards as it was originally intended. NPDES permits have a permit term of 5 years, after which they are still in effect but expired, and eventually have outdated water quality control requirements. All of the power plant NPDES permits covered by this policy have expired, and all the power plants all the permits need to be reissued as promptly as possible to protect the beneficial uses of the receiving waters. Due to the large number of once-through cooling power plants and minimal resources, the requirements for the State Water Board permitting actions have prevented timely adoption of effective NPDES permits. It is in the best interest of the marine and estuarine life to have an NPDES permit adopted by a power plant's corresponding regional water board so that regional concerns are appropriately addressed. It is more efficient for the regional water boards to reissue NPDES permits that implement this policy and the regional water quality objectives per the corresponding basin plans than to have the State Water Board adopt numerous NPDES permits for the various regional water boards. The State Water Board may unintentionally overlook or not understand the local water quality objectives and issues and concerns, thus not produce permits that truly protect receiving waters. To address statewide consistency, the State Water Board staff will remain directly involved with the permit writing effort. State Water Board staff will assist to address issues related to implementation of this policy and will assist in writing the NPDES permit language, findings, and compliance schedules per policy requirements. A notice of adoption hearing and notice of opportunity to comment was sent on April 19, 2013, and informed the public of today's adoption hearing date and provided the public a 45-day comment period date, which was due to the clerk of the board noon June 4, 2013. The general comments that were received expressed support for this amendment as it is more appropriate for the regional water boards to issue the NPDES permits. There was still some concern for statewide consistency, but staff reassures that the revisions that we've made in the policy in Section N clearly means that the State Water Board staff will provide consultation with the regional water board staff to make sure that all issues concerning the implementation of this policy are addressed. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
So I'd just like to add one thing, which is that with the proposed changes, we would revert the permitting back to the regional boards and allow for the petition process to be back in place. With the State Water Board adopting the permits, the only recourse for an aggrieved party would be go straight to court. And so this provides that structure that we're most accustomed to.
Great. But any changes to the overall OTC policy and dates would come back to us, right?
Yes, this is just on the issuance of permits. All
Right.
of our permitting is done, you know.
Excuse me, can I add a couple of things? We did receive 2 comments that were late. They were quite late. We received them 10 days after the comment period, and they're identical from 2 individuals, and they don't appear to be entirely on point. They believe that the amendment would grant a waiver of 316B, Section 316B of the Clean Water Act to Diablo Canyon, which the amendment would not do, nor would the policy. I have no particular recommendation regarding these letters, but I wanted you to be aware of them.
Thanks. Can someone just call and explain that to the commenters?
I believe that Phil Wiles spoke to the commenters,
Okay.
or at least one of the commenters that was an attorney. I would also note that we did circulate a change sheet It was posted on Friday and circulated yesterday. I believe we had copies available. It does change one aspect of the proposed amendment by eliminating the dual requirement for both state board and regional board approval of the Track 2 monitoring provisions. We had initially noticed it that way, thinking that statewide consistency might support having both bodies weigh in on that, but upon further reflection, it really would create an unwieldy process. So that's going to be just the purview of the regional board pursuant to the change sheet, which is section 4A and 4B of the policy.
Right. But is that petitionable, just as John said, if someone disagrees?
Absolutely, every aspect of these, of the NPDES permits issued by the regional boards would be petitionable to the state board.
Good. Any questions from the board? All right. I have two comment cards. First, I have Angela Herron from NRDC, followed by Sean Bothwell from the California Coastkeeper Alliance. Hello.
Good morning, Chair Marcus and board members. I'm Angela Herron with NRDC. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. As you know, NRDC has been very involved with this once through cooling policy for a number of years. It's a very important policy. As you know, it really impacts our marine life, and we're very invested and interested in seeing it implemented as written. So because of that, we're generally cautious, I will say, about amendments. But in this case, we are supportive, as our written letter indicated. It does make a lot more sense for the regional boards to issue the NPDES permits, and so we agree with staff on that. And so for that reason, we do support this amendment as drafted. I just wanted to underscore a couple of points, and again, we said it in our written comments, but this issue of statewide consistency is very important, and you have an excellent staff who's now been working on this for so many years, and they really do have a lot of expertise on the issues, especially with entrainment and impingement. So in regards to the change sheet that seems to give the regional boards just the authority to review those impingement and entrainment studies, we just want to make sure that the staff involvement carries through with that, and so that there is that consistency. And I'm hearing today from what Shuka said that that's the case, and so we're happy to hear that. I also just wanted, again, to underscore the importance of this petition process that I think makes a lot of sense to reinstate by putting the authority back to the regional boards. Yeah, I think that sums up my comments. I just want to again thank you for your leadership on this issue. It is a very important issue, not only statewide in the state, but nationwide, as federal EPA is still working on finalizing their once through cooling policy. So I applaud your efforts and really want to make sure that this amendment will allow us to implement the policy in a timely way and a way in which it was written and intended. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bothwell?
Good morning, Chair Marcus, members. My name is Sean Bothwell. I'm the staff attorney for the California Coastkeeper Alliance. I'm here today on behalf of the 12 California waterkeepers who work statewide from San Diego to the Oregon border. And on behalf of the Alliance, I'd just like to offer our support as well for the amendments to the once through cooling policy. We have several new members since the once through cooling policy was adopted, and I just want to underscore the importance of this policy to California Coastkeeper Alliance. We were there at the beginning pressing state agencies to take a position on the importance and the critical nature of once through cooling and its impacts. We worked side by side with State Water Board staff to get the policy adopted, and once it was adopted, we worked hard to defend some of the amendments that were going to weaken the policy. And today we still are involved in the implementation of those facilities and defending the policy, at the legislature against, some of the rollbacks that they've been trying to attempt to do. So given that importance, I just want to thank staff and State Water Board for really kind of considering this amendment and being careful about the way they crafted it. We appreciate the board and staff being there to continue to be an advisory role to the regional board members and to provide consultation for that. We think that's really important. I want to second what Angela said, and we mentioned this in the comments, that we would appreciate the board being more open to accepting petitions in this context. I know sometimes that petitions, it's not the most, Tam's laughing, but, you guys don't exactly enjoy taking petitions all the time, but in this, it's critical and it's important. And so I would just ask that, maybe we can consider that to be more open to taking petitions in this context. And so I just want to thank everyone. There's been a lot of open communication and dialogue about this amendment coming. We knew about it for a year now, quite frankly, and I really appreciate being given that notice, and it made everything a lot less, contentious once it's here. So thank you very much.
Thank you both for the thank yous, and thank staff for the engagement. It was apparent reading the materials that a lot of conversation had gone on, been anticipated and addressed. So I really did appreciate that. And Sean, while I can't promise what the board would ever do, it'd be pre-decisional. My sense, having been one of those latecomers to the board, is that people have an attachment to this policy and ownership over it, having bled through it. And you can send a thank you note to Charlie as well on that one.
So I'm a little disappointed unless one of the board monitors wants to offer an amendment. The last time we heard this, we had something like 17 amendments.
That's what I
And to have it
thought.
go forward without any is a little disappointing. But
That's right.
I have to remind staff that as one of those 17 amendments, the particular amendment that is specific to the NPDES permit issuance part was passed on a 3-2 vote, and guess who the two opposing votes were from?
Do I have a motion?
So moved with the change sheet.
Do I have a second?
So second, with the notice that if you stay on the board long enough, you do get your way.
Most of the time.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Motion carries. Thank you all for your work. You're going to have to tell me the story about that, though. I don't quite get it. Okay, item number 5. Mr. Bishop.
yes, I'm going to turn this over to Karen Turkovich to give the introduction.
Good morning, members. Today is another milestone in the implementation of the resource alignment work. I'm going to spend 1 minute and revisit some key dates with you. Back in October of 2011, the board passed a resolution directing the staff to take a look at our fees, look at how they aligned with our programs and where our expenditures were, and report back to the board on that effort. And we prepared a report that was then distributed in April of 2012, and based on that report we then received further direction, and that was, now that we had taken a look at our internal costs, now let's look at how we affect parties externally. And so the direction back in 2012 was to work with some key stakeholder groups in a limited number of areas to look at potential efficiencies that can be achieved in terms of the costs that the regulated community bears with respect to compliance with our permits, our regulations, et cetera. That work plan was brought to you in August of 2012, and in that work plan we identified 4 stakeholder groups that we would begin working with, and that was at the direction of the board previously. And they included the NPDES wastewater, stormwater, as well as irrigated lands, and the WDR stakeholder groups. We kicked off that effort back in 2012 with a great big meeting. I think we had 160 people on the phone, so a lot of interest and a lot of people on the room. And I won't say we didn't have phone problems, so we continue to work through these large meetings. And the 4 groups then kicked off their effort following the work plan that we had provided to the board. And that work plan involved a series of back and forths between the stakeholders and staff. So as recommendations were identified by the group of stakeholders, they would have an opportunity to interact with staff, to receive feedback, and then ultimately the work plan called for a report that would be prepared by staff and be presented this month. We deviated from that work plan a little bit The recommendations will be presented by the stakeholder groups themselves, not in a separate staff report. And we also, at the informational updates earlier this year, the direction was provided to the stakeholder groups, or the offer that if you happen to be on a somewhat different timeline than the work plan envisioned, that's okay. And so we envisioned that the groups would be coming forward at various times, and what you're going to receive today is a presentation from the MPDS wastewater group, and they've really subsumed the entire POTW community within the body of recommendations that they've made. And they, as a group, have met fairly frequently. They've developed their recommendations. They've interacted with staff on a number of occasions. And they've also met separately with the non-governmental organizations interested in those recommendations as well, although just that meeting was rather recent. The comments that the staff have provided to the stakeholder group last May, along with the non-governmental organization input, was made available to you. The stakeholder group for the POTWs recently submitted an updated proposal. I think they were thinking hard about the staff comments and the NGO comments. They made some changes and modifications. And so they will be presenting for you their set of recommendations, but all of the stakeholder groups will be providing you with a status report on their efforts. And my understanding is that Jeff Brousseau is on his way. I'm looking down the line here, and I do not see him. He is on a train that's supposed to arrive at around 10 o'clock. So he will be here, but we'll integrate him into the presentation later. What we had thought we would do would be to start with and they can go in whatever order they want, the other three stakeholder groups that have not as of yet formalized their recommendations to staff, and we would conclude with the POTW group for a more thorough conversation of their specific recommendations. And with that, I'll look at, I don't know how you would like to organize yourself. Who would like to go first?
I could start since I'm going to be very short. What? Thank you. Danny Merkley with the California Farm Bureau Federation. Initially, because we don't have a substantial update or something to give you from the last presentation that we made, for the
We've been keeping you busy on other fronts, I understand.
That's my excuse. So initially I was not prepared to make a presentation, but because of some things just in recent weeks, I thought I wanted to make some very brief remarks, particularly as this relates or does not relate to the fee schedule, since that's the hot topic of the day right now. One of the concerns that we brought forward from some of those that we've been working with was, that we brought forward in the past, was that there was a lack of belief by many in irrigated agriculture that this exercise was really going to provide anything fruitful and maybe some changes. When the proposed fee schedule came out, that helped to fuel that to some great extent. One of the things that that we do hope to get from this exercise is to see how things move forward with those in stormwater and that have maybe some more substantial recommendations, and see how the state board picks those up and runs with them. And I think that can provide maybe a lot more incentive for the irrigated lands program and folks involved to do that. Again, the reason, not an excuse, but the reason behind not having some more substantial recommendations. One of the reasons is because the folks that I really need to be interacting with, the folks that are on the ground, in the trenches, are trying to sort through the WDRs in the Central Valley and region, and through the ag order that's, still has a lot of moving parts and things in flux, as you know, over on the Central Coast. So as those things start to come into more focus, dust settles and whatnot, then I think we're going to have a lot more opportunity to get some better information to you and some recommendations. But that's going to take some time. In irrigated agriculture, and I've been farming my entire life, I'm not used to not meeting deadlines and not having severe consequences, so I appreciate this here. Usually if you don't meet a deadline in farming, you're done, you're toast. So just very, very shortly or briefly cutting to the issue about the fee schedule, I understand, and talking to staff, I get it and I understand the difference between this process and how it would impact the fee schedule. I understand the constraints that the board has dealing with the state budget process. However, that being said, there are some very direct links to this as well. And some of the biggest costs for agriculture are the costs of compliance, not the fees. However, when we see this program expanding and becoming more detailed and costing a lot more resources from the regulated community side, we have a difficult time understanding how we can't see some of the shift of workload coming onto us shift away from staff, and also seeing an increase in staff. Granted, that was the legislature's doing, but an increase in staff at a time when we're seeing significant increases in our costs, and more staff creates even more work and more challenges for agriculture to be in compliance with these things. So
Could also be better customer service, though. Faster turnaround times. I'm just thinking
Yes,
about the complaints I've been hearing.
yes, it could be.
It could be.
So so with that, I would like to beg your indulgence that we will be coming forward with some more recommendations. We would like to see some of those recommendations to be set up in a way that we are actually going to be able to provide good information, look at good results based on the work that we're going to do that would in fact reduce our costs and perhaps enough, and we would certainly hope enough, to offset increased fees as a result of not only the new positions that are coming forward, but then also the fee increases for the reasons that the fees have to increase for things outside of your control. That was a little bit more rambling than I had hoped for.
No, that's fine. This is a marathon, not a sprint. So, and doing this in phases is probably allows us to be more thoughtful about each piece. So, no worries.
And there are a number of things that I'm not going to speak to here because I see Michael's down at the other end there, and he might run over and turn my mic off. But there are a number of things that you'll be hearing from some of my colleagues down on the Central Coast, concerns about difficulties and costs of compliance as a result of moving targets down in the Central Coast right now, particularly after the draft came out about a week or so ago. Mm-hmm. I'm losing track of time. Mm-hmm. So, but you can expect to hear some things on that, probably in writing, that would point to ways that we can maybe make things a little bit more efficient, but still be moving forward to protect water quality.
Good. Tam?
I was going to bring this up at the end, but since Mr. Merkley opened the door for me by bringing up the fee schedule, I should have said that when I was at the San Francisco Bay Regional Water Board meeting, I did somewhat publicly say that with respect to my personal goals for this cost of compliant effort, since the staff will be coming to the board in September with the proposed fee schedule, which, as we all know by now, will include a fee increase proposal, it was my hope, and it still is my hope, that in reviewing the recommendations coming from these 4 work groups, that we would aim to search for implementations of recommendations to achieve an equivalent, at least an equivalent, level of compliance cost saving as what we might be considering in terms of the fee increases. Now, Mr. Merkley, this brings me to a challenge because I have no recommendations from you upon which to consider. But as you continue, and I appreciate the ag community's concerns and the basic, I guess, challenge back to the water boards to put our money where our mouth is and to seriously review and implement recommendations where possible. So I personally will take that to heart. But as you continue your effort within the ag community, and hopefully at some point develop recommendations, please keep in mind and for the rest of the other work groups as well, to form your recommendations and the cost data and the cost saving in a way as quantifiable as possible so that we can try to achieve that kind of comparison. Or at least that certainly is my hope and goal anyway.
A question, Tam. I don't help me understand the direct linkage other than aspirationally, because it might actually take more staff to save them more money in a bigger sense in terms of doing things that are more site-specific and all of that. I mean, my presumption has been, and this may just be a bias from having been a permittee, is that some of the things that cost us way more money were because there weren't enough sophisticated staff with enough time to actually pay attention to site-specific differences, or frankly, be able to tell the good guys from the bad guys, which is an oversimplification. I know that's one of the issues that comes up in the POTW thing, but that without having enough staff to be able to discern the difference between a good actor and a recurrent bad actor, which is more than just what you get in data. And I think so I just don't automatically see a relationship between the two. Obviously, I think we want to keep fees down too, but I don't see the link.
Actually, for me, the link is more indirect. And the reason I say that is having been through several of these very painful fee increases, I see that as a board member, I actually have very little control over the fees. And, the budget is the budget. And once it's passed by the legislature and signed by the governor, and the staff bring the fee schedule to us, there's just very little that we can do. However, the resource alignment and cost of compliant effort is an area where we actually have a little bit more control in terms of operations, administration, streamlining, internal processes where possible and where it does not endanger the water quality. So because, I guess for me personally, I have so little control over the fee increases, I personally want to translate that in my mind to see, in looking at recommendations, where it is possible to reduce the cost of compliance in an indirect way. I wanted to approach the process, approach the evaluation of those recommendations with that goal in mind, knowing that it's not as simple as I make it sound. I mean, obviously, depending on the recommendations, depending on what it takes from both staff resources as well as stakeholder resources. Some of the recommendations I've read, particularly from the POTW communities, if we're going to implement them, it's going to require the POTWs to invest substantially in those efforts as well. So, just implementation is not going to be as cheap as it sounds, but I guess what I want to express is to keep that goal in mind as we go forward and consider and evaluate these recommendations. Because it's very simple, it's very easy and tempting to read the recommendations with the mindset of, well, we can't do that because of this, or, EPA won't let us do that, or we can't. And my suggestion is, instead of approaching it with that mindset, let's approach it at least with the goal of seeing where we can find these areas of cost savings, and then, of course, work backward to determine what is feasible, what would it cost in the long term, and balance out that priorities. I agree with you. It won't be easy. There will be costs associated with it, and some of those costs will come from the stakeholder community as we engage them in those efforts as well. And I think they know that.
I would, to your first question about additional staff being able to focus more on specific areas where there are differences, there are instances where that can be helpful. There are many, many more instances where it has actually created more work and not necessarily something that's producing results that we can look at that's actually improving water quality. And that's one of our big concerns. It's going to depend on how staff is managed in this region or that region, and what type of a mindset they have coming forward to really look to be cooperative, and how much agriculture looks to be cooperative, so that we can coordinate and get better results more quickly. But oftentimes we don't see that. We see an us and them. And that's not helpful to the state, and it's certainly not helpful to the ag community or to water quality.
All right. I think the devil's going to be in the details in each of these, so.
Yep, we're going to move on. I want to move on, but just one thing I heard from your presentation, which was short on detail, but understandably, but was an allusion to other groups, which is, and you mentioned stormwater. And I wanted to just highlight and just confirm maybe with you, did you see opportunities for cost of compliance savings looking at other proposals from POTW's stormwater as applying to agriculture? You know, do you see some synergies in terms of themes that they brought up? And if you don't have to expound on that, but I encourage that for you to mine this other area where we have, as you point out before, a more mature regulatory program, lessons learned, and ways to economize going forward in terms of how the irrigated ag regulatory program is structured. Does that make sense?
The definition of originality is the ability to conceal your source. So if somebody else is doing something that works and we can copy that, very much so. But also, I think what I was alluding to is that I am optimistic, sometimes too optimistic, but I'm optimistic that we will see some successes. And as a result of those successes in other programs, it may start to wake up some other people to jump in and say, hey, yeah, maybe we can do something here. Let's offer some suggestions, and the Water Board will take those seriously and grab a hold of those and move forward. And that's my hope, and I don't like using the word hope, but that's my expectation.
Good. Thank you.